Hello, everybody. I really appreciate you joining us for another episode of Dev Relish. For those of you who are new to this show is basically like we're going to talk about all things related to being a developer relations professional or other kind of tangential jobs, tangential roles. That's the ish in the DevRel. So my name is Brian Rinaldi. I'm a developer experience engineer at Launch Darkly, and actually new for this episode. Erin is now officially a colleague of mine at Launch Darkly.
Yeah,
so
Brian, you have to deal with my crap now. We already probably talked every single day, but now it's like you have to talk and work with me.
Yes, I know. I'm still testing.
Still shocked. And yet, we're still working on it. It's been almost 2 weeks and he hasn't gotten rid of me yet. So.
Yep. Now it's just instead of just on Discord, I just have you on Discord and on Slack.
All the channels.
Okay, so joining us today our guest is Jake Ward. Jake is the founder of Data Protocol. Data Protocol also sponsors Dev Relish, so thank you for that. But and Jake, you're coming to us from like the middle of are you near the water there in San Francisco? Where are you?
I am. I'm down at the ferry building in the Embarcadero in San Francisco. We're out here working with some partners to build new curriculum and courses, and I thought I'd spend the afternoon talking to you guys down by the bay.
Yeah, it did look familiar. I thought that does look like you're right by the water in San Francisco. So
it's the Bay Bridge, right?
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hopefully the weather is nice and doesn't start raining on you.
It just
doesn't rain that much. Oh, okay.
I was going to say, this is like the most scenic background we've ever had a guest on this show. You're winning scene points.
I appreciate that. As long as the music doesn't interfere with the audio, we should be fine.
No, it's okay. I like Latin music. It's perfectly good. No, you can barely hear it.
Soundtrack of our lives.
So Jake, first of all, up till now we've had like everybody who's come on is working like a straight DevRel role, more or less. I mean, some people have been CTO, but your background is actually a little bit different. So first of all, you were like more of an entrepreneur, but you have a really interesting background. We were chatting about it a little bit earlier, kind of when I was digging through like your early career. I'm like, oh, this is different. You have like a really interesting career path. So tell us a little bit about what got you where you are today in terms of like working with the DevRel professionals and stuff like that.
I'll do my best to try and keep it to a tight 5 or 6 minutes. How's that? When I was a much younger man, I worked on Capitol Hill for the senior senator from Maine, Olympia Snowe. I'm also from Maine, so that was sort of a dream come true. I peaked early, as my mother likes to remind me on a regular basis. And in 2006, which seems like a lifetime ago, the very first net neutrality fight was underway, and Olympia she sat on the Commerce Committee, which was considering the rule, and she was the only Republican that was pro net neutrality. And so the founders of Google used to come to our office on a pretty regular basis and teach her how the internet worked. This was sort of a fundamental fight about how information would move around the interwebs. Everybody's probably heard the hilarious statement from Senator Ted Stevens about how the internet is not a dump truck, it's a series of tubes. That came from a hearing during that neutrality fight. He's actually responding to a question that Olympia asked the panel. So my first blush with tech was at a pretty high level, and from there I was hooked. I spent the next few years working, doing sort of policy communications for advocacy for big tech companies like Google and Amazon and others. And then in 2012, I co-founded the Application Developers Alliance, which was the first sort of trade association for software developers. And 2012, which also seems like a lifetime ago, we were on the front lines of a number of issues, right? Apple had just ripped Flash out of all of their apps. Privacy was becoming a real issue. We were getting ready to bang up against GDPR in Europe. There was a lot of stuff going on. But more importantly, I was on the front lines of having conversations with about 150,000 application developers in Europe and the United States. And I thought, these guys might be onto something. This might be really important. This could be sort of the future of where we're going. And I I remember saying once on stage that software engineers are the manufacturing class of the digital age, and they should be treated as such. That this is a skill, this is something that needs to be appreciated and taught and trained and continually elevated as a craft. And so when I left the Alliance, I sought to help the people, you guys, that are helping them, right? What is it that every developer relations person wants? They want more time with their developers. They want to give them what they need the way they want. They want to be able to measure it so they can defend their jobs, defend budget asks, and scale the programs. But mostly they want to enable developers to build cool stuff. And when I'm sort of in the post-Cambridge Analytica months, I spent almost a year and a half on the road talking to thousands of developers and asking them, what do you need? What can I do to help? And they all said the same thing. Tell me what you need me to do, whether it's how to integrate your product or how to comply with your rules or how to meet the terms of service of our partnership, and I'll do it. I don't want to break this. I'm not trying to do the wrong thing. Just be more clear about what you want. And so we set out to build that solution. And Data Protocol enables any company to treat all of their developers as if they are managed partners. White glove, everything you need, what you want in your hands when you need it.
Very cool. So yeah, you started out in more of the policy field, because I mean, typically on this show it's been like, okay, we start out as a developer and then we get into community, but I actually really enjoy the idea that you came from dealing with policy issues. And by the way, I was going to bring up that quote if you didn't, the series of tubes, because I do remember that exactly.
We had t-shirts made.
Did you really?
I love that. Hold on. Where can I find this? There's actually, it's like Under the Blue Sea or something, is a book that I read in grad school. And it's all about how the policy that went behind actually building the infrastructure of that. We called The Daily Show immediately, like as he was saying this ridiculous thing, we called The Daily Show and we had t-shirts made. And so when the final vote came out about a week later, a bunch of people were sitting in the hearing room wearing t-shirts that say it's not a dump truck, it's a series of tubes.
Erin, you may be too young for this debate. You may have missed this one. I think you were probably in elementary or junior high when
I was maybe in elementary and junior high, but I did take an internet policy class in grad school. And so not to be like y'all are in my textbooks, but like y'all were in my books.
Yeah, it's probably November of 2006, I think is when that hearing was. And that was actually
later middle school. Almost high school.
The rest of the quote is even more deranged than the beginning.
Oh, really?
He goes off on this thing about how his staff sent him an email last week and it just came to him, and it's because there's so much stuff in the system and there's too many things. It's like, actually, it's because you didn't scroll down on your BlackBerry, you old man. I shouldn't say that. Senator Stevens was a good public servant, and he's dead now, so rest in peace. But the times they did pass him by.
Yes, I remember those times. I mean, not to kind of belabor this point, but I remember years ago, I had a job and I was building websites at this. We focused on like stuff for doctors and medical stuff. It was just a marketing firm, and then my boss was like, my monitor was acting up, and she's like, "Do you think it has a virus?" And I really had a tough time explaining to her why that wasn't possible.
Fairly certain it does not.
See, now that's just me with my parents because they have no idea what I do for a living. I did ask my mom. I was like, "Mom, what do you think I do?" She's like, "How's your new job?" And I asked her, and she's like, "You're a person who fixes bugs." And I was like, "Actually, kind of, maybe close. I actually create them more than
that's a hell of an evolution, Erin. She used to think you spammed the internet."
Yeah, we've moved from spamming the internet to fixing bugs. But then I asked her like, what kind of bugs, and she's like, "I don't know."
No,
you still do it, people I don't know online. And I was like, all right, cool, fair.
That's a bridge too far. But policy is an interesting place to start this conversation, right? Because the vast majority of policymakers, particularly 10 years ago, but even today, are certainly septuagenarians. They're not. I'm not a digital native, right? There wasn't a computer in my house. I'm 45. There wasn't a computer in my house until I was 14. The difference between being able to make decisions that affect people at scale on these complex issues has a lot to do with your comfort and your fluency in that space. And what I found pretty early in my time in politics, and even more in the years following, is that the gears of innovation and policy don't align ever. Like innovation spins like this and policy is supposed to spin like this. So if they ever catch, it's almost a mistake. And that we have to do better for ourselves. That as an industry, technology needs to be responsible. It needs to be proactive. It needs to imagine a world in which there are no guardrails from a regulatory or legal standpoint that actually apply to the next thing, because policy only looks backwards. And that's the other reason that I built Data Protocol, is to give developers what they needed to not make mistakes and to responsibly use data and products and build their dreams.
Right. So, and when we got to tour the product a little bit, but so to kind of get a better sense of for everybody of what you can do. So Data Protocol, like basically you can manage your community by creating videos and things like that, and being able to kind of cater content directly to different parts of your community to kind of cultivate it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of turning this into a promo, which I'd really rather not do because nobody wants to listen to that. I believe that video is a better way to deliver information to an audience. Mm-hmm. I think that it's more intimate. I think you can add more nuance to it. And so we built a platform that leads with video, that is developer facing. I don't want to get into the nuance of it. If anybody who's listening wants to take a look, just go to dataprotocol.com and check it out. But there's a Linux terminal in which we can ask questions, and there's a notes function. So we drive home sort of engagement. Your hands stay on the keyboard, and the information you need is brought in chyrons and layered in notes. So if you're going down to a dev doc, which is sort of standard for every point of engagement in this, when you're building a community, right? The first thing that we usually lead with is developer documentation, because that's the language in which we speak. But that's so limited in what we can prioritize and what we can add. Links and interaction are often just seen as noise on the page, whereas video, you can do much more nuanced explaining of complex issues and let people choose their own adventure. And so we built this platform that is single sign-on, fully attributable. So you have an account. Our partners use us to build content. We write it, produce it, host it, all of that. So we're one-stop shop. We don't add any work to any of the developer relations, developer engagement teams. And you send them to us, we'll send them right back to you. But when they're here, we've got video, we've got resources, we've got interactive dev docs. All of it is attributable with metrics. The outcome being a higher level of engagement. You know that they know what they need to, and you can give them updates and information. It's sort of the Rosetta Stone of community relations, right? It's at scale. It feels like one-on-one. It feels like this. It's asynchronous, right? It's there when you need it. I joke that it's what Stack Overflow would look like if you didn't have to yell at people first. It's a better way to deliver information.
So let me ask you, because it is actually something we debate in DevRel is I tend to favor, personally, I tend to be more of a writer. So I'm not great at creating videos, even though I do this all the time. So, but but I do feel like there is a generation of developers, particularly the kind of ones that are entering the market, right? In the past 5 years or so, that really tends to go straight into YouTube or something, to basically find out I don't Google it. I actually go to YouTube and I search for a video about it.
That's me.
Yep.
That's Erin. See, this is the benefit of having multiple generations on the same show.
I was going to say, I'm a partial Googler, but I started probably 2015 was learning to code for money, got my first, and it was email templates. And that was, I do remember Shopify was releasing, it was mostly in the Shopify ecosystem. And but they had, it was their docs and the YouTube videos were helpful.
So I don't think the mechanics have changed much. When a developer is sitting, on a line, right, and they encounter a problem, the first thing they do is turn to the person next to them and say, have you ever seen this before? Or do you know how to do this? Right? That is universally true. It's true of my team. It's true of yours. With the increase in remote work, where we're not near people. Instant Messenger was invented so the developers could talk to each other to fix problems. That's where that came from inside Microsoft, right? But the next thing that happened, and I was incredibly fortunate when I launched the Alliance, Joel Spolsky, the founder of Stack Overflow, was the chairman of my board. And so I spent a lot of time with Joel, who was there at Microsoft when they were doing all of this stuff. And he built Stack because he wanted to take that value add of asking an expert or asking somebody who'd been there before and scale it. And I remember him saying, developers aren't going to turn to anybody and ask a question that isn't a developer that hasn't seen that problem before. The only way you can outsource that to a larger community is to do it at scale, which is how they got the 20 million monthly users, right? But the problem with that is it brings all of the usual humanity bullshit where people are mean to each other and they talk down to each other and there's all of that noise. I don't think people liked it. And you could see that immediately when ChatGPT and Copilot took off, their numbers dropped by 50% because people didn't want to get burned before they got the answer they needed. They could just put it into ChatGPT. That's all sort of technical stuff. Like, have you seen this? Is there a workaround? What would you do here? Stuff. What we're trying to build is much more on the solving big problems, right? Looking at challenges at scale. How do I solve for GDPR? How do I navigate this compliance issue with MetaQuest? What do I need to know about Web3 if I'm going to use smart wallets at Circle? Things like that we build for our partners. And all of that, it leads with video because 83% of developers, according to Slash Data, say that they prefer video be the primary function for delivering that information, which all makes sense. But YouTube alone isn't enough, right? There needs to be the next piece. There needs to be a level of interactivity where you don't just get an answer, you remember it. There's proficiency. We know we can ask you questions so that I sleep better at night as a platform, that I've just given you all this data because you've demonstrated you read the privacy policy, you know your terms and services, you've run through all the traps, we're good. You sleep better as a developer because you know I've got your back. Any resources you need, any support you need, it's right here, right? We've curated it for you. We've put it in milestones rather than just sort of spraying it all over your dev docs. There's still a reason, there's a need for developer documentation. And this goes back to the community piece. Like, you have to focus on giving developers at scale answers when they need it. But if you're command effing your way through 40,000 words, there's a pretty good chance you're going to miss something.
Yeah. And I think like one of the things I think about a lot, and I think in my own learning journey, like where I have personally a lot of gaps, like, and I know my gaps, like I can, if you give me a problem and you tell me to figure something out, I'll figure it out. But you're like, why did you do it that way? And I'm like,
right.
Like, and I kind of stare at you for a second because a lot of it has been stumbling and figuring out what works. That being said, like one of the things that I think is really interesting is we're getting the tailored made stuff. One of the demos that we used to give all the time at my old organization is how do you train GPT based on a GPT model on your developer documentation, which is fine to a certain extent. And then it breaks and it hallucinates. And if no one is sitting there actually running the code, you're going to find it.
Yeah. I was in this conversation the other day with, I've been doing this for a minute. I've known a number of real life 10X coders, right? Like people who, it's what they do. Their brain is just wired that way. There's no problem they can't solve. The frustration they have with people asking them all day long, how do I solve this? How do I fix this? What does this look like? Is like an 8. But the frustration they have when people don't ask is a 10. Right? I can solve this for you in 90 seconds. Just ask me the question. But imagine you could do that at scale, asynchronous, on demand, where the question can be anticipated, the answer can be relayed, and that information is there whenever somebody needs it. That's the dream. So that you're not taking those experts off the field, you're putting them in a studio for 45 minutes once every 6 months, and you get all of the answers you need for forever. To your point, Brian, about how many developers are getting better at doing video. There's no question that's true. I had a meeting this morning with one of the OG video content creators out here who talked about what an amazing moment it was when they started putting lighting in his office so that he could record videos 5-6 years ago. And that's important. I think that the quality of the video matters, right? I think that this shouldn't look like it was filmed in somebody's basement. That to the point of this, the manufacturing class of the digital age, we should respect the craft. And when we shoot, we do it in a studio with green screen and a full full crew, gappers and grips and DPs and the whole deal, because this stuff's supposed to live on for a long time. And the quality of it, I think, needs to be commensurate with the need. And these guys need help.
So one of the things like within DevRel that I've struggled with when creating video content is like, what do you do? How do you fix things? It's a constantly moving environment. Yeah, because I mean that's the trouble. Like we create YouTube videos or whatever. I mean, like at work, and it's like, oh, okay, well, the UI has changed. This has changed, and like I can't really go back and easily edit that into those videos. What do you all do? Like, how do you solve that?
It's a great question. So one of our early problems, right, in our path, how do we scale this, and then what happens if something changes? Because something is going to change. What we found is that by breaking videos into components and then having the graphics beside it, we can just change the graphic, right? So instead of saying in this developer documentation it does these things, you say in this developer documentation you're going to find the answers you're looking for, and then on the side are links to the dev doc with the bullets. So to swap that out is not a problem at all. You change the link, you change the animation, you're up and running in an hour. Sometimes, and this happened pretty recently, something changes that you have to say out loud. Increasingly, we're able to use AI to change that, right? That we can go in and grab enough audio from this conversation, from whatever, that we can get you to say a new sentence. And with the inflection right, and with your approval, we just drop that in over it. We did that last week. You'll never know the difference, right?
Having used some of those tools, like I always find the inflections really hard to nail. So are you using a model that's you can be like, Erin, no propriety out of the box, but like, are you using a model that's already existing, or have you trained it, fine-tuned it? Like is that kind of worked off of?
We have to train it to do better.
Okay.
We're able to get like one sentence right now.
Okay.
Right. We couldn't do 20 seconds yet. We've certainly played around with the idea of using avatars. They all look pretty dead in the eyes, which I don't love.
Yeah, too. I also just think they look so creepy. Like
yeah. And I hate data protocol is not a learning management system, right? But it's got a lot of the bells and whistles of a really good one. And one of the things that I like about an LMS is being able to measure proficiency, being able to pull that data out, being able to integrate across things. One of the things that I hate is how frequently in order to solve this problem, they abandon using a person and putting graphics on the screen and just animating something and then doing a voiceover. I think that's just shy of a voiced over PowerPoint in terms of just not worth my time. And so we avoid that entirely. But if we wanted to do, for example, what we call a TLDR, so it's just a 90-second update, we're deprecating this API, you need to go to this link, this is really important, and we needed to do it really quickly, we could run an animation and pull down an AI-generated voiceover, or I could VO it, who cares? And then it would just lay over the top of something else. The short answer is we're getting better at it. We're already pretty good at it. It is part of what we offer our clients in terms of what they get for their money, is we'll update things as needed.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it. I have tried things like Descript early on. I don't know if you know Descript, but like, and I think it's gotten better because that was one of the ones where you could just go in and fix, but it wasn't perfect. But I think it's gotten a heck of a lot better. One of the things I funny enough, because I do, so when I record videos, one thing I tend to have a script and so you're not looking at the camera. And they had an update recently that it'll actually make it look like you're looking at the camera. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that might get me to go try it again. Yeah.
That's on Descript, right? Like that's that's cool. I do have it's kind of annoying. Like I just moved my camera, so it does cut off. Like it does interface part of the screen, but this is also like what happens when you have a way too big monitor. Like I can sacrifice little screen real estate for.
I've seen Erin's screen share, and it's like it's obnoxious.
It's like,
It's like, how many windows do you have open? And then I of course leave all my windows open, so it's like.
I'm imagining you live in this tiny little New York apartment with this monitor that takes up half the apartment or something.
It's the TV. It doubles as the TV.
Basically the TV. It's basically the TV. And it's so funny. Like we have our desks. Like my husband and I have our desk battleship style, and then he has a big monitor too. So it's like this. Like
you can't even see each other.
Yeah, we can. Oh no, I can't see him at all, and it's so he gets so annoyed because we also will drop in like if one person drops in a huddle or not, like you'll start to hear the other person in the background recording, and there's times I've been like, that was such a great take, but I can hear my husband in the background.
Nice job. We it's funny. We put everything on a teleprompter. Like part of the other thing is like as Launch Darkly, you want to do this thing, we get the outcome. Our content team has instructional designers. They lead you through discovery. We write the script, you approve it, you come into studio, it's on a teleprompter. So all of this, right, it's a very personal experience. And then post-production gets it, the animation comes in. I joke that it's the best thing on the internet, but I'm not really joking. It's really good. But the point is that it's supposed to be commensurate with the effort.
Yeah. I mean, these are the tools I was describing. Obviously, are for much more like just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna ad hoc throw up a video about.
But it's coming.
Thing. But
it's coming though.
But
it's really interesting stuff.
Definitely. I mean, it is amazing how quickly AI has transformed. Like, I think even like for DevRel, honestly, I think it's been more useful in many ways than I would say as a pure developer. Like, because when I'm coding, I'll use Copilot and it's helpful and stuff. But there were tasks in DevRel, like for instance, chopping up this video later and getting highlights, right? Like that used to be a nightmare. And because it was like so much hours that at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, is this really worth the effort? And I kind of gave up on it. And now I just push it into like an AI thing. And it's like, oh, here's all your highlights chopped up perfectly for you with like, the
task I love it for is I will say like some kind of like what you were saying earlier, Jake, is like the pre-produced like super static, like basically glorified PowerPoint type YouTube videos I'm equally annoyed at, and I'm like, I'm not gonna watch this. Like I won't. So I've actually found myself following a lot of Twitch streamers because I like the live interaction, or I have a question I can actually ask and learn a ton, and I've actually learned a ton that way. But like that being said, it's like one thing that I did at my last role is a lot of I would practice work through something on Twitch or work through something in like a team call or a Zoom call demo, and then I would take the recording and I would stick it in transcript, and there's my tutorial blog post.
Yeah. I mean, that's so to get us back on topic, because I'm pretty sure I derailed this whole thing. If you were going to start a community right now, like you've got a new product, it's SaaS, but it's developer first. You're selling to developers in mass, right? Or they're your customer, they're your users, but they're not their customers. You're building scale on the backside of it. Net new, you're starting today. What's the first thing that you do? Right? The first thing that you do is build a funnel that leads with video so you could introduce yourself and show people how to use your product. For your, to the point of this is my blog post, you'd put it in video, and that's how you'd run it. You'd probably use Twitch, maybe YouTube. The truth is neither of those do what Data Protocol does because we have the attribution engine, but that's just a slightly different model, right? But the piece that we would naturally skip over, but we shouldn't, is the metrics. And not just because it's how we keep our jobs, but it's also because that's how you learn to get better at it. You can't ask your community to do your job for you. You have to ask them how to do their job better and then adjust accordingly. We don't have those metrics.
Yeah. I mean, I think having used like YouTube a lot, like it's very hard to figure those metrics out from what YouTube gives you. So all I know is like I know the watch time and I know raw numbers of how many viewers and things like that, but like I can't figure out like, for instance, it's hard to figure out why they stopped watching, or
you have no indication of why they. So actually, this is a thing that my team and I have been doing for the last couple of weeks. Typical SaaS product. You spend a lot of time and energy and money. You go to events, you marketing, think pieces, whatever. You're driving people to the top of your funnel. You're showing them your product and you're trying to convert them to adoption, right? But in that space, all you have is ostensibly Google Analytics. How long were they on your site? What did they click on? That's it. You don't have any attributable network metrics. If they don't adopt and register, it's a black box. You have no input as to why they were there, why they left, how they got there. You have none of that information, which means that when you actually do the conversion from adoption all the way down through to like cost of service, lifetime value, generated annual, et cetera, your ROI number isn't right. It's wrong because it doesn't account for any of the bounce pre-adoption that you know is happening, but you don't know why. So you can't improve your uptake. It's just trial and error. Like what if I went fishing in a different pond? What if I led with this? What if I showed price earlier? And you find a thing that works well enough that you're not going to change it. So one of the things I tried really hard to do is solve that problem, to create an attribution funnel earlier in the process. Hold on a sec, sorry.
This is the very San Francisco.
Yeah.
In the wild part.
That's right. Is to create a process whereby you have sort of an SSO earlier in that pre-adoption funnel, so you could ask questions. How'd you get here? What are you looking for? We know that developers adopt based on, do what I need it to do. Will it keep doing what I need it to do? How much does it cost? And do I have support as I go through this process? If you can answer those four questions to their satisfaction, they're going to adopt your product. But how do you lay out a website in order to answer those questions, not knowing why they got there in the first place?
Right. Yeah. And I think, to that point, and I've seen it kind of brought up a bit lately, as, we kind of hit peak DevRel pre-COVID, right? Maybe even during COVID, where just every company seemed to be hiring DevRels like crazy. And then, now we're in kind of a post-peak, a bit of a downturn for DevRel in general. And I think one of the things and we've talked about it a lot on this show, one of the things that DevRel folks have to kind of adopt is this: I need to buy into some more metrics. We used to be like, oh, it's hard to measure what we do. And I agree, it is hard to measure what we do. It is. But at the same time, we can't. Ultimately, we need to find metrics that can validate that we're doing a good job, that we're having an impact on. I mean, at the end of the day, DevRel is about selling more software. Really, we like to be. Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly.
It's either on one side or the other, or both. But you can't be a black box on both sides. You're either growing the product or reducing breakage, or both. You can't do neither.
Right.
Well, and Jake, that brings me to another question. And how does, because we see roles like community, and I think community roles are probably another role that you don't see a title like community manager, head of community events person. Those titles aren't as much around anymore. I'd be curious to get your take. Is this still a standalone independent role from DevRel, or is it more of a customer service function these days, or is it a DevRel function that they should handle?
I think it's a really good question, Erin. I came up when Twilio was doing its thing, right? Keith Casey, James Parton, and Rob, and those guys were, and Linda Smith sat on my board at the Alliance and was an advisor early days at Data Protocol. She's incredible. They invented this level of hand-to-hand, door-to-door DevRel. They were doing hackathons 15, 20 a week, right? And they were for 10 people. They didn't care. They were just showing people how easy this was, because they knew that if you primed the top, the same phenomenon, people were going to ask, how'd you do that? And they just tell them, and then it's one more click. And that growth, they saturated the market. But even now, they're reducing DevRel across the board at Twilio because you can't grow it anymore, while they're increasing engineering support because you can break it a lot. The question about community management, I think it's entirely about how complicated your product is and how important or how frequently you need to engage to do it well. I think so. Zoom, I think, is a really good indicator of where this is going. This is a product that's been around for 20 plus years that nobody had ever used before the world came to a screeching halt. And then it became this rocket ship for stock. They hired a bunch of people. Then they had, oh no, we might actually have a privacy problem. We've got some other feature stuff. We're not ready for this from an engineering standpoint. And so they doubled down on the number of engineers and did a really nice job writing the ship incredibly quickly. And now they've got this new API that they want to roll out that puts all kinds of community functions and features on their platform, which is cool. It's really cool. So they're hiring DevRel folks to go tell that story, but they're using sort of outdated modes of communication to do it. Not because they don't know what they're doing, because they're limited in terms of what they can deploy, right? You can't manage this on a Discord channel. You can't just run a Slack channel and keep people happy. Common Room is doing an incredible job. Orbit is doing an incredible job putting people in a position where you could have more conversation, at least with the highest indicators of whether or not this is working. But it has to be scaled at an asynchronous level in order to be effective. You have to do a better job one-on-one, or at least virtually one-on-one, if you're going to drive that level of engagement. I don't know that anybody's doing it well yet.
Yeah.
That's really, and Erin actually came from, you were at Orbit, right?
Yeah, I was at Orbit.
They're great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a good idea. They in Common Room are way down the road on doing some really interesting stuff. But the question about community management is like one to many. I think we're done with that. I think it has to feel one-to-one.
I think the biggest takeaway I have from someone who worked at Orbit, who's been in those community roles, I started my first job in this space as a head of open source community. And it was an accidental, like, oh, you're not a product manager anymore. You're now a head of open source. Good luck. Figure it out. And I remember Googling, like, what does a head of open source do? Like, what does head of open source community do? Like, what should I be responsible for? And I think, I got the question recently. Someone asked me, like, why did you move to DevRel from community? Like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, first off, I actually like the building part of it. Like, I am technical. I like the building part, and that's fun for me. But secondly, I have maybe a spicy take that, like, you can have the best numbers, the best metrics, the best everything in the business, but at some point it doesn't matter. Like, are you engaging with the right people? Are you engaging with a stakeholder? And are you actually solving a problem? Like, looking back at my career at Orbit, like, specifically, the worst feeling is like knowing that engineering something was broken, or we were sunsetting something, and being like, I can't do anything. This sucks.
That's right. One of my original board members, sorry, Brian, one of my original board members of the Alliance, Don Dodge, he was you guys might know Don, he's a legend in dev advocacy. He was at Napster, he was at Microsoft, he worked for Daniel Lewin. Anyway, when he was on my board, he was a developer advocate at Google. And this was, again, 2012. I'd never heard the title before. And I was like, what's the difference between dev advocate and dev evangelist? And he's like, I don't go talk to developers about Google. I talk to Google about developers. My job is to take what they need and bring it in-house and to advocate for them inside this company. That's really cool. That's also sort of what community management needs to look like, which is that you are asking for a show of hands, and then you're going out and shaking a bunch of them. And so you're saying, talk to me. What do you need? Why is this breaking? What are you seeing? And 2, 3, 4 of those, that's a trend. It's time to go talk to engineering. And then you work through documentation, you look at product features, you can improve. We talk about this all the time. You can improve your product, your process, and your program with metrics. With anecdotes are not enough. You need hardcore metrics. And we've just been terrible at collecting them for 20 years.
Yeah, I think, well, to go back to that point that I was talking about earlier, first of all, I have two thoughts. Number one is, I think there was a difference between dev evangelism and dev advocacy. Now it's kind of like the role is like, to me, it's kind of both at the same time. There's nobody who's specifically that one way anymore. I think I don't know if you all agree, but I've never talked to anybody who can say, oh, I'm just there to kind of bring the stuff back. It's always like, I'm there to be the megaphone and also to bring the stuff back.
Google's a different animal too. I think that's, I think that might be a Google specific thing.
Oh yeah, and I mean, honestly, Google's revised their DevRel program multiple times. So everybody has, like, we go through phases. I've been doing this long enough to be like, I've been through various phases of DevRel, to the point where, like, sometimes I get like, they're like, oh, what's the difference between this title and that title? And I'm like, it's a slight change in focus, but it's really very similar kind of role. But I do think when we were in that kind of peak phase, it was easy to get away with, like, because everything was growing. So when everything was growing, everybody's like, oh, it's okay. Like, we'd love some metrics, but it's okay if we don't if we don't have them, because we know whatever you're doing seems to be working. And then now it's like, now when things are tight, it's like, well, we have to justify our existence, and not just our existence. Like maybe they're not looking to like lay you off, but they may say, hey, you know what? We're going to pull your events budget because we can't prove that you're going to events is actually working. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, correlation isn't enough. When times get tight, causation is the only thing that budget makers are looking for. If I do this, will it do that? Because predictability and smoothing out revenue is the key for any company of any size. Those spikes and drops, that'll what'll put you out of business.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So like, and figuring out what those metrics are, I think it's been the topic of a number of our conversations here. When we talk to different people, like there's different theories on what those metrics are, which ones like make the most sense. And
so one of my big things when we started doing data cuts inside the protocol was that I didn't want to do sampling, right? That sentiment had to be better than representative, because 1,000 years ago when I was in college, like I know what response bias looks like. You're going to get squeaky wheel stuff. I hate your product. I love your product. My service is terrible. Erin's the best. Those are the only two options of people that are engaging. But if you could ask everybody, then you're going to get a real representation of where you stand. Could you do better? Should you do better? Would it even be worth it if you did better? If you've got 82% approval rating, should you chase the other 18, or is that just dead money? Right? There's some of that math that can only be fed into the machine of where you put bodies and resources and time if you have those answers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we just need to figure out, in each company is kind of different, what those answers are, like what the numbers are. And, I always, when I brought this up in the past, like, not recently, not in this role, but in past roles, it was like, well, because it's fuzzy, like I can't prove that number's perfect. And so like, then I'm just not going to use that number. And it's like, well, at a certain point, you just have to find a number that like, okay, to your point, like, yeah, you have those, and I don't necessarily have everybody's answers. I only have the squeaky wheel answers, but I need some metric in like in that, if I'm going to say, that way I can say, well, okay, we're 82% is not good enough for us. So we're going to see if we can do things to get it to closer to 90. And sometimes you find that metric and you dig a little bit and you put some effort into it and you find out, yeah, I can't move that metric. There's nothing I can do. And then you find a different metric, but it's not a matter of like, I don't have metrics, because it's difficult. I'm going to just be like, hey, I can't measure. We can't measure DevRel. So, we're just not going to.
But it's also, I think one of the things that separates, having kind of been in this role in a couple different and like seen a lot of different folks in the space, like one of the things that separates people in DevRel and community that I really admire and look up to versus folks that I'm like, what are you doing? Is like the ability to A, confidently say, I don't know, and it doesn't matter, or B, like, is this a metric I should actually care about? And like, C, I think, data can be manipulated, data can be modified. Like data, you can make it paint a different picture that it is. How you frame the story is how you tell the story. And it's knowing what is statistically significant to you and your goals. And I think that's something we don't want to have the confidence, or like we sometimes get uncomfortable saying that, like thinking about what is statistically significant. Wow, that's a hard word to say today.
It is. If you were, again, back to this net new, like you're starting from the beginning, you would lead with something that puts a face on your product rather than letting it, product-led growth is important. Person-led growth is the thing that really moves the needle. Like, do I trust this person to give me what I need? Does the product do what I want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So that's net new. But the other piece is you'd build the pipeline from metrics. And so for us, like I begged the product team over and over again to build all this stuff, and they've done an incredible job. Both the questions, right? We ask questions in each video. Sentiment overall, is this good? Did you like this? Do you want more of this? Stuff like that, but also milestone driven. Are you taking this at this point in your life cycle so that we can set parameters around where people are getting information, how valuable it is? We ask proficiency questions, and then we have on-platform metrics of what other courses did you take? How did you correlate this answer with that answer? What you get in terms of data cuts is if you come in from VMware and you did this, and this, you are more likely to have a high proficiency with this subject. So we can tell VMware, send them through all of this, and you're less likely to break your product. I don't care if it's 20 people or 20,000, the significance of the statistic is less important in that instance than the outcome, which is a reduction in breakage. But if you're talking about, do people like this? It needs to be either incredibly representative of a statistically significant sample or comprehensive and give you a number you can live with that is directly attributed to churn and burn in terms of people bouncing off your product. Because if 100 people are saying, I love this, but your breakage is 50%, people are leaving, they're lying, right? Or you're getting the wrong people, or there's a milestone after the course where they are being forced out of your program. And you need to identify that, or you're going to keep leaking developer partners.
Yeah, those really, really good points. So we are running towards the part of the show, Jake, where we, people come for the DevRel and all the tips and stuff like that, but people stay for the pickles. And so we're at the point in the show where we rely on our resident pickling expert, Erin, to give us our pickle fact of the day.
This is actually just like the most important part and gives me an excuse to keep Googling and learning things. But today's fact is from the Pacific Islands, where natives pickle their foods in holes in the ground lined with banana leaves and use them as food reserves in case of storms. It's like fermented stuff in there. These are some of the most valuable food items in that part of the world. And they are used as part of the courting process, proving that you can provide to a woman in the courting process. You cannot marry or enter into marriage without showing your parents the pickle pits. So...
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
I'm very disappointed. I'm honestly, I can see my husband tuning in this chat every so often, but I'm very disappointed. Where the hell was my pickle pit? Like,
Erin, I came with my own pickle facts.
Ooh, I'm ready for this.
Today.
Nobody's done that yet, Jake. Nobody's
done this. You're the first.
A fact might be a stretch. From a pickle perspective,
okay.
I am not a huge fan of actual pickles. Like I will occasionally eat them, except on a Chicago-style hot dog, in which case they are amazing.
And they have a requirement.
Yeah, drag it through the garden. Have you ever had a pickled fiddlehead?
Ooh, no, I don't even know what a fiddlehead is.
So fiddlehead it's a green, and it has sort of a bulb that turns over at the top, so it looks like the end of a fiddle arm, and it grows wild in Maine. It has you boil them, you can steam them. I would steam them. They tend to come apart. They're delicious. They have sort of a almost, it's not bitter. It's sort of like this tangy taste to it. But if you pickle them and chop them up and drop them in salads, they're incredible. Again, I don't even like pickles.
I'm so fascinated. I'm like, this is very into it. They're like
I just Googled what a fiddlehead is, and okay. I don't think I've ever eaten fiddlehead.
There's no way you have. Like, why would
Rachel knows.
Rachel's like, I'm a fiddlehead pro.
They grew in the backyard of my childhood home.
Okay. Erin, you have a new task.
I have a new task. I need to discover pickled fiddleheads. But I'm reading this. A young fiddlehead fern cooked in Indonesia. It's cooked in a rich coconut sauce with chili pepper, lemongrass, turmeric. I'm like, that sounds amazing.
That sounds so good.
That sounds so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should not be talking food. I'm getting hungry already.
I know. I'm like, now I need to jump off and like eat after this. Is like my next task. Is like, holy cow! Thank you for that pickle fact. I am amazed.
You're very welcome.
I need to adventure. New England is only a jump and a hop, skip, and a jump northern from me. So
yeah, they've got them Vermont for sure, probably New Hampshire, but in my backyard in Maine where I grew up, we had lots of fields of.
I'm on a quest. I am on a quest.
Yeah, be interesting. I think, maybe if we made it such a thing that maybe future guests will bring pickle facts with them too.
No pressure. If you're listening and you want to be a guest.
You're now the second person who came on. Jake, you're now the second person who came on who's not a fan of pickles. So, the last person just flat out was like, I don't really like anything pickled. And then I was, Erin nearly shut the thing
Yeah.
down. She's like, this interview is over.
Over. The other thing is like, honestly, like we let him have it. We let him get away with other fermented things, and we came to the conclusion that there are other fermented things, which is technically pickled. So
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, I like things that are pickled. It's pickles that I don't super love. And it's
Okay.
mostly dill pickles. Like, big standard dill pickles are not my favorite.
But most of them are like, honestly, they don't like, unless they're done like with the good, like I like the good, like spicy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Put
can
some
always be
flavor in
done
them.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put
Yeah.
some flavor.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, like
Yeah.
your traditional Vlasics don't always do it for me.
This
Yeah,
is why
and-
I got to try an Erin pickle at some point.
They're
and
spicy.
See if it.
Yeah, they're good. Mine are like,
Spicy?
I like spicy, and like I put a lot of mustard seed in it.
I like it. I'd eat that.
Yeah.
I'd eat that.
Crunchy.
All right. Well, this was such a fun conversation and really interesting, Jake. And I really enjoyed learning about your background because I mean, yeah, it's just so you come with a very different perspective than really anybody we've had up on the show up till now. So really appreciate that.
You have to get lost a couple times in your career to end up in this seat, but I'm happy to be here.
All right, Jake and Erin, we'll say goodbye. We will be back next month. We'll have details on CFE.dev soon. We also have an upcoming episode of Too Full to Stack later this month about Next.js, and an episode, a presentation by Roselle Scarlett coming up in early December about Web 5, which I know nothing about. So I'm really interested to learn about that. So hopefully we'll see you all there. Thank you all for attending. Thanks, Jake, for being our guest, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Love the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.